Hello there, my loves. Thank you for joining me once more. So, today I thought I'd do something slightly different. I'm not going to talk about any particular book, but rather the difference between books and audiobooks. Or rather, the difference between listening to a story and engaging with it yourself through a physical medium, whether that's a Kindle or a physical book. Is there a difference between the two, and what do you personally think? Now, for me, I've always considered listening to audiobooks as kind of cheating. Now, I know a lot of people will disagree with me here, but I've kept a list of pretty much all the books I've ever read, and I've listened to a lot of audiobooks as well, but I haven't included one of them in that list. So when I used to work as a data entry clerk, for example, I worked for Royal Mail for a long time, and it was just a mindless job where I was just inputting postcodes and addresses. It got to the point where my mind, or part of my mind, was able to do it without me even thinking about it. So it's quite a boring job at that point. So I would listen to a lot of audiobooks. And that was quite wonderful in that I had no other distractions and I could fully immerse myself in that story. However, I think the problem is a lot of people listen to audiobooks like me, like I was working. So there will be an element of distraction. You're not fully engaged with it unless you're perhaps listening to it in bed, for example. Even then, though, when you're listening to a story being read to you, your mind can still wander. Of course, the same applies when you're reading a book. That happens to me a lot. I'll be reading a paragraph and all of a sudden I'll get to the end of the paragraph and I think, well, I don't remember anything that I've just read because I was thinking about something else. But at that point, you then reread that paragraph. I don't think the same applies to audiobooks. People would rarely reverse it back and listen to it again. So I think there is a difference in terms of engagement. However, I'm sure I read once, I don't have anything to back this up, but I'm sure there was a study done whereby the brain activity of someone reading a book and listening to a story being read were recorded, and they were more or less the same. So the amount of data that you're taking in can potentially be just the same between the two ways of delivering information. But that same thing still comes back whereby it's about engagement, whether you're as able to take in the information if you're doing something else. Now, I think that's probably why a lot of people turn to audiobooks, because it's a lack of time. People have far less time in their days to get a book out and start reading it. In fact, I'm also guilty of that in that the only times I read are in bed. So in the morning, I'll have half an hour before I go to work, get my book out, calm myself down, read a bit of a story. I'll do the same in the evening when I'm going to bed. I'll read for about an hour then. However, I would never dream of taking a book out in the middle of the day because it would feel like a kind of guilty luxury to be doing that. That time could be better spent doing something else. Therefore, I think in today's modern world where we're all very busy, audiobooks are there to fill gaps. A lot of us do jobs that are perhaps not that mentally taxing, and so we need something else to fill in a bit of that space in the mind before we lose our minds. So, some people might go for a walk or go for a run and listen to an audiobook, be doing it whilst they're working, doing it whilst they're cooking, something like that. So I think that form of engagement with a story particularly won't be the same as engaging with it when it's right in your face and you're having to work for it. I think this also harks back to me as I used to struggle with reading. I don't know why. I've talked about it on here before, whether I've got undiagnosed dyslexia or the fact that my poor eyesight wasn't diagnosed until I was 12 or something like that. Those could be factors that contributed to me not wanting to read. I hated reading. I could not stand it. But it's probably because I was looking at the page and words were all over the place. I couldn't be bothered to learn new words. and all of that nonsense. But as soon as I got into reading, I absolutely loved it. But I never lost that idea that reading a book, finishing a physical book from cover to cover, was always an accomplishment, something that by the end of it, I felt like I've achieved something. Listening to audiobook, there's no achievement there other than pressing play and pressing stop at the end of it, or perhaps pause for a slightly more taxing experience. But yeah, the two aren't the same. One of them requires work, the other requires you just sitting there and opening your ears. Of course, being read books is something that harks back from childhood, before we had perhaps the ability to read for ourselves. Parent or a friend or whatever would read a story before you go to bed. So that tradition of getting information, particularly in the form of stories, by vocal means is a kind of natural thing for us humans, of course. But it all comes back to engagement. So my argument would always be that. And so that's why I'll never put an audiobook down on my bloody list. What do you think? Do you agree with me? Do you disagree? If you do disagree, let me know why, and we can talk about this another time perhaps. So this conversation that I've started having with myself is born from the fact that I've decided to start doing some audiobooks on my short stories. It got me thinking about it. But anyway, so at some point I am going to be making some short stories, audiobook versions. They're going to be ropey things. I mean, I'm not getting any pro voice actors in. I'm not going to be using AI either. I should say that. I'll be doing it myself, but it probably won't be brilliant. So I'm going to be putting it straight on YouTube rather than Audible or something like that. They have quite high standards by all accounts, and I'm not going to jump for all the hoops to put it on there. So it will be available for free on YouTube. But anyway, before what I'll talk about next is this whole idea of making these short story audiobooks made me think about the covers that might garnish each one of them. And this was really fun. So what I've decided to do is take some of my old paintings, or some of the ones I've done recently, and turn them into book covers. But certainly I was attempting to reference the old style, so the covers of the 70s and 80s specifically, science fiction. Kind of pulpy, slightly potentially naff looking perhaps. So what I'll do now is show you some of the paintings and then how they were converted. So the first one is this one I did recently. This was a painting that took me forever because I just kept layering over and over again. Eventually I ended up with this image here, and I thought that could be quite an arresting image on a book cover, so I did this to it. And yeah, I'm quite pleased with that. I didn't do much to it. I added a bit of shadow here and there to allow the light sourcing to pop, shall we say. And the typography is nothing special, but yeah, there it is. And I increased the size of that planet in the background. The next one, this painting, one of you, Billy, it was Billy that said it reminded him of the story Wonderworld that I wrote. So I thought, well, we'll stick that on the cover. So for this one, I've turned it on its side, slapped the title on, and it looks like that. I don't know if that's particularly good or not, but there we are. That's the next one. And the last one I've done is for a short story that I wrote called Apartment. And I took this image, which was a painting I did that I called Incubator, because I imagine this young woman is being thawed after arriving at a new location, a new world potentially, before being woken up. And because this story involves a young woman, I thought, well, maybe we can use that. So I've done that to it. Again, I don't know if that's quite as successful, but there we are. There's 3 covers that I've just boshed out. It didn't take very long at all. So normally when I work on my covers for my other books, I spend weeks on the bloody things. These ones is really quite refreshing just to knock them out really quick. yeah, they're not going to win any awards, but they'll do the trick on the thumbnail if I ever get to that point. I haven't started narrating them yet because the only time I can do it when it's quiet enough. I haven't got any soundproofing in this room. As you all know, there's various intrusions on a daily basis, but so I'm going to have to wait very late at night until it's nice and quiet to record them. But I'm usually too tired to do it. But eventually I'm going to do that and they will be available. But anyway, let's leave it there. I've been rambling like a mother as usual, and I'll see you next time when hopefully I'll do a book review. My time is slightly, I'm squandering it left, right and centre at the moment because I had this idea to do a painting for all of the guests at our coming wedding. So I've got to do 30 of them. I've done 2 of them. I've got 28 left to go. And it's quite crazy, really, because I've been asking, well, the children that are coming, what kind of things they're interested in, and some of them are going to be quite hard to render. This is my own problem. It's my bed, I've made it, and now I've got to get it in their bed and sleep and whatnot, and do the painting. Anyway, let's leave it there. Cheers for watching, and see you next time. Cheerio.